What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Derby Wormy. I'm coming at you with my episode 20 review of G Gundam. I really like this episode. I really, really like this episode. I like several episodes of G Gundam, but this is one of those, like, episodes that you can just pick out and watch over and over again and think, hey, this is a good episode. For what it does. For what it is required to do. You have episodes like, let's take episodes from the Kyoto arc, where it's telling an overarching story and taking one episode out and judging it by itself. I don't think is fully fair, but I have to do it. Kyoto arc as a whole, fantastic. Kyoto arc separately has issues. Some good episodes in the Kyoto arc, but some crappy episodes. You have the Gundam of the Week strategy, which you have okay episodes and episodes that you're just like, okay, let's get it done. But even in those Gundam of the Week stories, you had one really good one. And that was Argo's episode when it dealt with Lumber or Grizzly Gundam, the Canadian Gundam. And that storyline that impacted Argo very heavily. And who Argo is as a person. You then have this episode that kind of really required for George. George hasn't had very much development in this entire show. Saishi has had some. Trying to think. Chippity, you really only got his first episode where Chippity got development. You could say in his third, like, standalone episode when they went to the Ghana Highlands gave him some development, but there's a much better Chippity episode down the line, and we're nearing that episode. That's a good episode. Then you have Saishi, who he has moments here or there. You can say several of Saishi's episodes have also given him development. But a lot of his episodes are, hey, quit being a kid and quit goofing off. He gets some very much needed development in some later episodes coming up as well. That being said, George is one of those lacking characters. There's a reason I don't like George. He's always prim and proper. He's always kind of very stale and stagnant. This is a George-centric episode that I can sit down and say, I like this. I like it. Because it deals with a similar theme that we've been dealing with for the past 3 episodes. Let's see, 1, 2, yeah. The past 2 episodes plus this one, so 3. PTSD. And the effects it has on individuals. How, in this world, a lot of it has affected Chippity, struggle fighting. Freaking out at the crossroads of, does he want to continue being a fighter? Does he not want to? Fighting spirit, things of that nature. You have Saishi, who says that he's fine fighting, but every time he can train fine, but he just refuses to fight. Then, because of his battle with Argo, he gets the courage to fight again. This episode deals with George, who continues to fight, but versus Chippity, who was at the crossroads, Saishi, who kind of just gave up altogether. George has taken the continuation, but has gone a darker path, let's say. Very disturbing path, and not acting like a knight. Not acting his prim and proper self, and this is conflict and development George needed. So let's get into this episode, shall we? Considering this is also like my 5th time trying to record it, with OBS went down, internet went out, so on and so forth. So let's get into it. So we open up, and I'm just gonna break the news. We're in Neo France colony for Neo France. France's colony. Anyways, we're at the colonies, and a shuttle is escaping. It is saying, hey, being chased by some of the guards, saying, hey, you don't have permission to leave. It blows up the 3 guards chasing him, and breaks out of the French barrier just by force. We get our acknowledgement that, hey, today is France. The shuttle left there. It's now on a course for, just had the name, the Guiana Highlands. And it will play a part today because it is actually holding on to today's opponent for George. Even though he comes in like the last quarter of the episode, it is a man from George's past whose first two parts of his name are French, but I can remember the last part. It's Marable. So we're calling him Marable because I don't remember the rest of his name for the life of me. But Marable is a dirty fighter. He is a awful human being, but he does, even though he comes up more towards the quarter, he has a part where he pops up in the before the middle part, but it's a flashback. He has history with George. And it is conflict that George has seen that is very unique. So, let's get into this, shall we? Intro. Yay. We open up fully start the episode with George training with the butler. And now I really like the butler's unit. It's cheesy. It's not as prim and proper as like the Gundams themselves. You can tell like it's older and everything. But there's parts of it that I like. And we're about to see one. Because the butler isn't faring very well up against George and is struggling. And I'm going to point this out. Like, come on. This is unique. It's the only Gundam mech unit, battle unit, armament. It's the only unit that has a steering wheel and polars and levy. Polars. It is so obviously like an very old model that he's using to try to train against George, and he's not as well. He's not well equipped. But George is saying, hey, you're not strong enough. I need somebody stronger to train with. And the butler says, hey, I've been serving your family for 45 years. And don't forget the man who taught you how to fence was me. So he kicks it into high gear. He uses this pulley unit. I'm not kidding you. He literally uses a pole. He activates something saying he's going to give it him his all. And when he does, it so obviously is such an older unit because it starts sputtering and everything. Just, you know how like in an old cartoon, when you dealt with an older car, it would spitter and sputter. And I like that. I like that about this unit. It has some charm to it. So, we continue on. Butler gives it his all, but immediately falls down on his back, and George looks at him saying, hey, you're just not strong enough. I need somebody better. I need somebody worth the challenge. I've surpassed you. Doing it very kind and honorably for who George is. Well, let's be honest. George is at another level compared to the butler. Like, George has increased in standing. But as George is, kind of being kind and consoling, and also you can see, like, he's not happy having to admit this to the butler. He begins seeing things. Like, the butler begins... He starts freaking out. And slowly the butler, for him, becomes the Dark Gundam. So this is when we get our reveal that, hey, George also is dealing with PTSD. So how is George dealing with it? Well, as George sees what he thinks is the Dark Gundam, and as he's freaking out, he begins wildly attacking, going out of control, and in this moment, you see rain comes by while George is freaking out, and the butler and his unit grapples with George and Rose Gundam, to try to calm him down and get him out of this rage, out of this berserk. Because that's a good point. Like, George is losing control. And yes, Rain just happens to be there, but they also point that out in this episode. Like, she's not just there because she's to be there. She's there for a reason. So, end up cutting over to a little lakeside thing where Rain's being served wine by the butler. And the butler tells him, hey, you're here. You're a doctor. George has been dealing with some issues. Could you please give him a checkup or something? Like, hey, I need you. And with that being said, he fills him in like, hey, something's wrong. George says, nope, I'm perfectly fine. I don't need any help. Rain says, well, I am a doctor. And she says, nope. Then he points out that, hey, it's kind of odd that, you just happen to be there at this perfect time. You just happen to be in the area. Almost as if you two were planning this. And it's kind of hinted at that, yes. Yeah, actually, it's kind of explicit. Yes, they were planning on the two of them helping out. Rain freaks out, runs. Butler realizes it. And then George tears into the butler. Like, why did you do this? Why did you go behind my back to ask Rain for help? And the butler says, I've been serving this family for 45 years. This is my duty. And I've cared for you. I've cared for everybody. I'm just trying to help. And George is furious because he doesn't realize that how badly he truly needs this help. He thinks can just muscle through it himself. And he tells the butler, like, hey, if you do this again, I'm going to be mad. Like, you went behind my back. Butler says he'll never do it again, and he apologizes. Just, it is what it is, and tells him to leave. We now cut to, I'll have to admit it, it's later in the night, but we cut to Waterfall where we see Domon training. He's in Shining Gundam, not Burning Gundam. Burning Gundam's coming up. I'll just leave that there. But we see him training in Shining Gundam. Slashes through the waterfall with ease, but then he says, hey, what is it that leads to the super mode? What am I missing here? In that moment, a rock gets hurtled at him from behind. Domon notices it, jumps up into the air, slashes it all with ease. You have the reveal that the butler is the actual one that threw it at him. Says, you're really good, you're improving a whole lot, and then he comes out of the unit, and I love this. There's a uniqueness to the butler's unit. He comes out and he pleads with Domon, saying, I really need your help. Like, a lot. I need you. We then cut to George again, and I'm going to admit, spoiler moment, this is a dream sequence. I have to do that because it's so random, but it's so unique. In George's dream, he's like, hey, where is everybody? What's going on? And then he notices, I'm going to get her name wrong probably, but Miss Marie. George's princess character person thing. The young miss, who I'm pretty sure is underage. Anyways, he sees Miss Marie. He's very happy to see her. Consoling face. Somebody that George really cares about. Happy about it. Sees her fall to the ground, and she gets picked up by the Dark Gundam. Seeing this, George leaps into action, summons Rose Gundam, and when he attacks, he doesn't attack normal. Like, he forces himself through, and I don't know if I can get the shot just right. Like, he tears through the Dark Gundam. And as he's coming through the other side, he starts getting absorbed by DG cells and starts freaking out. Wakes up, realizing, hey, it's a dream. Oh, he was laying down on the table. when I saw this, I didn't see this frame where it's pretty obvious that he fell asleep. He fell asleep drinking because he's not well. And he bursts awake saying, hey, something's wrong. You can tell, like, hey, he was drinking. He's been drinking a lot. And at that moment, he starts calling for the butler, whose name is escaping me, so give me a break. And the butler's not responding. He calls multiple times, but the butler's not there. This leads you to realize, hey, he knows the butler's gone. Cut back to George, well, Domon and Rain, where they're like, hey, so what do we have? How are you going to show us? How can we help? Like, what are you planning? And the butler shows battle data. Now, if you remember back to, I want to say it's Chippy's time at Guyana Highlands when they first came there, his girls tried to steal Domon's battle data. Battle data is very important. It has all the weaknesses, all the battle information from the unit. And this is technically treason for one country just to hand it over. This is very important information. But he said, hey, he'll be mad at me, but I have to show you guys this. This is important. Domon acknowledges that was very important, and he shows them the last battle that... Oh yeah, I can use my mouse wheel to turn up the volume and stuff. The last battle George was a part of, and in it, you see this random Gundam. George is fighting, obviously in France. And in this battle, George is not the George we once knew. He wins the match, but he wins it very brutally, ripping the head unit off. Not destroying it, he straight up just rips it off. This is not the elegant George we're so used to. This is a very brutal and savage George. And by seeing this, they take note, like, hey, something's wrong here. Like, this is not George. And the butler fills him in, like, George will train every day, but when he fights, he's different. He's not the George we once knew. There's something up. And I'm pleading with you as a stronger fighter, as a man who's training yourself, can you please help? I care about him, and it might have something to do with his past, where we end up getting shown also developing some of the Gundam tournament here, how it works. We get shown a year ago where George was fighting in the final round of a tournament in France, in the colonies, to see who will be representing the colony. And it was George versus Marable. So in this match, George is giving it his all, but his opponent Marable was dirty and would always position himself in front of the audience to keep George from using his full force, while Marable would be able to use every weapon he could. And he did that. He was firing upon George. George was losing right before, like, George was about to lose the match before it was called off by one of the leaders of France, right here, this dude, who basically said, hey, Marable, your fighting style is dirty. I despise it. You do not represent France. Therefore, George will be our representative. Because in France, they're more chivalry, knights, honor, things of that nature. As much as I think they're very, stuck up, it kind of makes sense. You see George and stuff. He's very prim and proper. They want prim and proper. Well, with hearing that, Marable freaked out, saying, no, I will not accept that. Attempted to fire upon basically the government. George stopped him, like he thrusted a fist through him, causing Marable to fire rockets everywhere. And that's just what happened. And it caused a massive destruction, hurting audiences, hurting Maribel a lot, and causing a disaster, which is known as the Marseille disaster. Or the Marseille tragedy. He blames himself for this when it wasn't his fault. So, because of the Dark Gundam, he sees this tragedy over and over again and freaks out. Dark Gundam reopened old scars. We also then find out what happened to Maribel. Because Maribel is technically the one that caused this, he was sentenced to, I want to say it was 1,000 years, either 100 or 1,000 years of indentured servitude, prison. Let's say that, because it was work camp. It was a worker camp. So indentured servitude, but I'm just going to call it prison. In the colonies. And he was sentenced away. And because of that, the Dark Gundam has reopened old scars. So Domon says, well, what do you want me to do? Just fight with him, please. I'm begging you, fight with him. And George appears. Because again, they established, hey, he knows the butler's up to something. The butler wasn't there. Already conversed with Rain before. Maybe he's colluding again. So he's now there. He's seen everything. And he's like, that won't be a problem. You don't need me to help him. I don't need your help. And with that being said, because one, he obviously is aware that he transferred the battle data. Two, he went against his direct order to quit interfering and don't get Neo Japan involved. He doesn't want help. He wants to do this himself. Or he doesn't think he needs help. He's fine. Because of that, George says both as a representative of Neo France, and then he stops himself and says, no, as a descent, I am terminating your employment. You are no longer a part. I no longer need you. And you see Schwarzbruder there watching the whole thing, and halfway point. Like I said, this is a very serious episode. It's out of the blue. Taking this halfway point just to point out, several of these episodes I've been going 30 minutes, maybe longer. I'm at 22 minutes right now talking, and so much has happened in this one episode. This is a really good episode. I'm not lying when I say this is a good episode. Now a little weird part, but gotta go with what we gotta go. In the Guyana Highlands, again, this is South America, we come across a bar in the middle of nowhere. And as you can see, the butler's there. Go into the bar, we see him drinking and everything, and he's kind of consoling himself, sad that he basically lost his job, a job he's had for 44 years. 45 years. This is something that he's dedicated his life to. Drinks his drink, slams it down on the ground, and tells the bartender, more coffee. Just charming. Cut over to Domon and Rain, and Domon inspecting the blade and saying, hey, this is France's problem. We don't need to get involved. And Rain says, you know what? Maybe we should. It is important. Maybe we should help. And, you have, these are your friends. And Domon kind of takes note of, hey, what do you mean by friends? And she tells Domon, hey, we came here for you to train. And it just so happened that Chippity came here to find you, to get help from you. Happened that Argo came here to get help from you. It happened that Saisashi came here to get help from you. They're coming to you for help. That makes you special. These are your friends. And she makes a note of, hey, I wish I had friends like that. And that kind of says something to Domon. They're coming to him for help. They're coming to him for aid in their times of crisis. Even if they're not meaning to, they do end up seeing Domon and they say, something's here, let's go to him. Playing on the Shuffle Alliance crests. These are members of the Shuffle Alliance. So each one of them, technically Domon is their leader. So even if they don't mean to do it, they do acknowledge that Domon is a better fighter and Domon can help. We cut back to the bar where the butler fell asleep but is awoken by a news report informing them that Maribel has escaped and is heading to Earth. With that, but the butler realizes, oh my god, Maribel's out. He's probably going after George. So he quickly rushes off. He rushes off to George. Just going to spoil that part. Pretty darn obvious. Again, this is establishing, hey, this guy has served George for years. It doesn't matter if George kicked him out. He is going to do his job. This is something he knows he can do. Cut over to George where he's admiring the beautiful sunset and he says, why won't this beautiful moment brighten the darkness within my heart? And while he's doing that, he gets startled by a bird, but then he's kind of sad, and he starts reminiscing about the butler and all the good times he's had with him. A little guy, but this is also a man who's been in his life for practically his entire life. Again, this man has served his family for 45 years. He's important to George. We then have Rain and Domon appear, and they come to talk to George, and Domon just lets George have it. Because, again, George isn't wanting help. And Domon says, hey, knock it off. You're not acting very knight-like. You're acting very pathetic. You're acting too brutish. You're acting like a moron. You got rid of a man who was trying to help you because of your ego. This is not a knight. You are not acting in honor. These are things that hit it for George. Remember that George is a knight. George is honorable. George is a man who cares about that stuff. And with that all being said, Domon kind of said, you also are a member of the Shuffle Alliance, so make sure that crest is known. And as he's about to finish up, they see the shuttle from before coming after them quickly. And it's not just anybody in the shuttle, it's Maribel. Let's be real, we already knew that. And Maribel's coming down to face George. And when George sees him, he sees the Dark Gundam. So George begins freaking out. Maribel starts firing everywhere, firing upon everybody, and is determined to take his entire revenge on George. As he begins firing, we cut back to the butler as he's very much, I'm coming to save George. Because he cares about George. Jumps over this thing, and it's a funny little moment where he tries to get over the ravine, misses, gets up, and falls into the ravine. Gets up again, and proceeds to try to locate George and finds him. Okay, it's a funny, charming moment. It kind of out of place after what we just saw, but it does show the butler's committed to this. The butler will do what is right in this moment. We cut back to Maribel and his particular unit that does have a name, but I don't remember what it's called. It's not named in the show. I had to go off the wiki one time, and he's just firing. Just constantly trying to hit George, saying, hey, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to get my revenge. You ruined everything. And he starts trying to crush George. And in that moment, Domon says, hey, I've had enough. Like, I'm done with this. You've gone too far. Gets into Shining Gundam. Comes down and punches him hard in the head. Like, you see this dent that was just caused by Domon. Domon tries to use Shining Finger, but then is stopped by Schwarzbruder. And Schwartz says, no, this is not your fight, Domon. This is a fight for George. George must do this. And take a note. We see there's a massive dent in Maribel's head. And as we're seeing this, we notice, hey, it's starting to heal. And that's when we are shown that Maribel has actually sided with Master Asia and has DG cells. He is now changing up, becoming more rapid and wild, firing all over the place, being enraged, just chaos everywhere. Domon can't do anything. I believe he sees missiles coming over at Rain and George, technically. Domon freaks out, and just then the butler comes running down a waterfall, gets in front of Rain and George, and takes the hits. Because he cares about George, and he's gonna do this for George. And in that moment, George, seeing his butler blow up, this man who is important to him, he freaks out. He can't take it. He gets in the unit, and he is not happy. He is very vengeful. And he begins fighting back, and just wails into Maribel, brutalizing him, just fighting him at every cost. And it's insane, tearing off his arm, going full crazy mode. And as George is basically about to just outright kill him, Domon steps in to stop him. Domon tells him, hey, you need to knock it off. This is not Nightlight. This is not you. You need to calm down. Or is that crest on your hand, did they mess up when they gave you that crest on your hand? And in doing this, Domon activates the super mode when he's telling George to calm down. Relax. You need to relax. Remember, people are still here, and Rain shows up with the butler still healthy. He's hurt, but he's healthy, and the butler's like, hey, George, I'm fine. Just calm down, please. We care about you. And seeing, the butler safe, somebody he cares about safe and not injured, George realizes that, hey, he's been wrong. He needs to do this for George. He's messed up. He knows he's in a tough spot, and he needs to start calming down and realizing who he is. And he feels shamed for falling as a knight. Domon consoles him, and he points out the crest and everything. So George does something pretty messed up, but he rips into the cockpit, pulls out the cockpit, seeing, Maribel here tied up in pain and stuff, being cursed. And George uses the power of the crest. Again, I wish they would have done more with these crests and explained what they're doing. But he uses the power of the crest to purge the DG cells from Maribel, ending the fight. We see, the butler and before somebody says this is Guy, no, this is father figure. This is somebody who cares for George as a son of sorts. This is a man who really cares for George, not gay. This is like Bruce and Batman. They love each other familiarly. This is family love. George purging everything. And Schwarzbruder tells George this is the actions of a man who now has a heart in his fist. Where when it came to Saisaishi, he couldn't care. He didn't have the will. No. Yeah, he didn't have the will for Saisaishi. The fighting spirit was damaged for both him and Chippity. Argo was having a hard time just fighting altogether. He doesn't like fighting except when it excites him, when it's a challenge. And with George, he lost his heart. He had darkness in him. And this is what happens when you have the heart in your fist. You're more calm, cool, and collected and empathetic. And this speaks to Domon. Then cut to George basically taking back the butler, acknowledging that he messed up. The butler was trying to do what's right, and he cares about the butler, and the butler taking him back. Get over to Rain and Domon, where Domon looks at the sword and says, I want to know what the secret to the super mode is, so I will be training more. I will be training until I perfect it. And that's pretty much that. That's pretty much that. Again, I really like this episode. I think it's so unique for what it is. I think it knows what it is. And you could take this episode out. Need a few episodes here or there just to kind of explain it. But you could take this episode, turn it on, and just watch it. Perfect episode. Just simplistic story, simplistic development for George that was needed. He is not prim and perfect. He is not the full knight that he is, but he wants to be. And he has his own conflicts. He has his own issues. And I really appreciate it, and I really like it. And I hope you guys go out and check out episode 20 of Gundam. I'm not joking. This is good. And I'm also not joking when I'm telling you the next 4 episodes are possibly my favorite arc in all of G Gundam, and it ends with one of the most iconic G Gundam scenes. Like, a scene that is pure art. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I kind of already did because I said something's coming soon. But I'm not going to spoil the whole thing because this episode, you can take it out and watch it alone. Those next 4 episodes, I watch religiously. I have them on physical copy. So, with that being said, guys, leave your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And I really hope I earned your guys' subscription. And please, if you do enjoy this and you do enjoy my work, press that subscribe button. Press that notification bell for every time I put out a new video. Share it around with your friends. And bye for now.